We've got trouble. Remedios sat up in her bed, stretching her arms over her head with a yawn. She looked around, sleepy-eyed, eventually spotting Liam in a corner of her bedroom. What sort of trouble? She twisted slightly to regard him. Did a fight break out? No, Liam looked away. Something happened on the north coast. People are saying that a lot of wreckage is washing up on the shore. They're saying that this year's trade fleet has been destroyed. Where did you hear this from? Everywhere, Liam said. I heard it from House Rastello, first. Then I went around the city to see if anyone else knew about it. Everyone knows about it, at least the nobles do. They each have their own sources. Messengers from Bandarimian are reporting the same thing. She threw back her covers and swung her legs over the edge of her bed. After ringing a bell to summon Carla, she padded past Liam to look out of the nearest window. The nearby manors were all lit and activity could be seen in and around them. Has the Holy Order always been this oblivious? No, it's because the Royal Army is gone. Normally, it was the military that organized intelligence and coordinated the different institutions of the Holy Kingdom. Remedios wondered if Caspont already knew what had happened. Going by the nobles' age-old tendency to keep information to themselves until it was advantageous to reveal it, probably not. What have they been saying? She asked as she sat down across the table from Liam. It's all been speculation about what happened, mostly, Liam answered. They are putting plenty of armsmen onto the street, too. I overheard a few lords sending for even more. What's the point in doing that? Remedios frowned. Are they trying to put together an army? It's not as if Hobans is under imminent threat. I don't know, Liam shrugged. Maybe they're doing as you say. Or maybe they're just scared. Why must it be just any one thing? Carla's voice came from the doorway. The maid stopped just inside the doorway, her eyes going back and forth between Liam and Remedios. After a moment, she walked toward Remedios' wardrobe. Allow me to fetch you a robe, Miss Custodio. Remedios turned to exchange a look with Liam, but Liam had fled somewhere. She shook her head and went to join Carla in the wardrobe. What's taking so long? It's not like this is some special occasion to dress up for. It's not that it's a special occasion, Miss Custodio. I just believe you should be more considerate of young Liam. Why? He comes by every week or so. Carla's lip twitched upward. The maid's eyes seemed to twinkle as she gave Remedios a mischievous look. Is that so? I hadn't realized the two of you had become so intimate. Huh? He was around me all the time before. You know, back when he was staying here. The maid released the smallest of sighs, holding out a white gossamer nightgown. This one should do. Please wear it properly. Does Liam's visit tonight have something to do with what's going on outside? It's a few hours too early for people to be up and about. I was just getting the details from him. I thought you should be around to hear them. They left the wardrobe, finding Liam sitting at the table again. Remedios went to take a seat on the edge of her bed. Anyways, she said, you were saying, Carla? I was going to say that the nobility's reaction to the news isn't driven by any one reason, but I suppose that wouldn't exactly be correct. They are driven by one reason. And what might that be? Remedios asked. That Prince Felipe's fleet was seemingly destroyed, Carla answered. The way you two were trying to analyze the actions of the aristocracy is akin to the thought processes of an apprentice artisan, believing that the whole is the sum of its parts. A novice will never become a master if they think like that, and this can be applied to any walk of life. I don't get it. I don't doubt that, Miss Custodio. But, at the same time, you will never want to analyze a situation by breaking it apart and analyzing the pieces. Yet, you tend to come to the correct conclusions because you are instinctively aware of what I'm describing and don't fall into the logical trap that so many others might. Sure. If you say so. She still didn't get it, but it seemed that it didn't matter anyway. So why? Liam said. Wait. What? No. Clara grinned at Liam's confusion. The maid went over to sit on the chair across from him, resting her right arm on the tabletop. The nobility received news that Prince Felipe's fleet may have been destroyed. In response, they are, well, rendering the appropriate response. Armsmen are being mustered because it is, in essence, a security concern with everything such concerns involve. Gathering forces in the capital is both a strategic and political move. positioning troops in a central location that can react to further potential incursions while showing the crown and the citizens of the capital that the aristocracy has the means and will to face whatever it may be that threatens the Holy Kingdom. So they're not just gathering men for their protection? Liam asked. I had hoped you would have known better than that by now, Liam, Carla sighed. Royalist or conservative, the nobles are doing what they believe to be their duty. If personal safety was their priority, they would go on a permanent vacation to Aruenshu. Where's that? It's a city in the southern hemisphere, many thousands of kilometers from here. My point was that they wouldn't stick around in an unsafe place if safety was their priority. All they'd need to do is hop on a ship and sail far away. All right, so what does that mean for us now? Remedios asked. It is what it is, Carla shrugged. Everyone is doing what they should be doing. I don't know how many soldiers they're sending to Hobans. Every staging area should be facing a similar influx of personnel. Hobans is about to get much busier. Was that a good thing, or a bad thing? I'm surprised they're acting so decisively, Liam said. Based on what I've seen, both factions are pretty slow and methodical in their moves. It would be fast if this was the first inkling of trouble, Carla replied, but the Royalists have been investigating their late shipping recently. That was true. If one included loading and unloading times, a round trip from Cantor to Ban would take roughly a week. At first, the Royalists were flinging accusations at the Conservatives over their missing vessels, but, realistically, the idea of the Conservatives attacking Royalist shipping was so ludicrous that no one took it seriously. The nobles were probably already half poised to send expeditions to investigate the missing transports when the news from the northern coast hit Hobans. How will the Royal Army factor into this? Liam asked. They should have been mustering soldiers at the wall for the last month or so, shouldn't they? Trying to recall them using ships is impossible given the current situation, Carla shook her head. At best, they can have them withdraw from the coast if they believe an attack is coming from the sea. Otherwise, it's probably best to leave them where they are to serve as our eastern bulwark. Just what we need, Remedios grumbled. More armsmen running around trying to run the city their way. Does anyone have any real idea who is responsible for the wreckage on the northern coast? Carla shook her head. This isn't information that one sifts out of rumors and local gossip, she said. Anything that Liam has heard will probably be as close to the truth as one can manage. Remedios and Carla turned their eyes to Liam expectantly. The young thief-taker cleared his throat. It's still messy, he said. House Rastello has no idea what's going on, but the ship they sent with their conscription quotas and Sir Luis is over a week late, even accounting for poor sailing conditions. The conservative nobles in the Prime Estates got their news from Rimian and they have no clue who is responsible, but they have confirmed the identities of many of the fleet's ships. As for the Royalists, it's complicated. Complicated? Well, this is from listening in on their conversations for the last few weeks. Their territories along the northern coast received demands from the demi-humans offshore to cease all fishing activities. Why would they do that? Overfishing, most likely, Carla said. That's about the only thing they would take issue with besides dumping garbage into the sea. Going by how the Royalists have managed things in Hobans, we can assume that the population in the north was driven to fish more than usual to survive. One could say that we were lucky they warned us about our treaty violations instead of enforcing the treaty by sinking all of our ships. That's one part of the speculation, Liam said. Some were guessing that Royalist ships were going missing because someone was still breaking the treaty. Now, they're wondering if things have escalated into a full-blown war. If it was a war, then they had already lost. There was no way for the Holy Kingdom to successfully fight aquatic opponents, so they would just end up landlocked with the demi-humans getting what they wanted. That would be terrible, if true, Carla said. The Holy Kingdom would become a poor, isolated pocket of land filled with warring tribes of humans. I don't think it will become that bad, Liam said. You just don't appreciate how much we rely upon the sea, Carla told him. Our country would only have half the population without it. Imagine the anarchy when mass starvation hits. Now that I mention it, I should brush up on my longsword. You can fight? Liam frowned. Of course I can fight. I'm a daughter of House Vigo, you know? Liam peered at Carla for a long moment before shaking his head. I guess I'm used to nobles being flimsier. Most scions have at least some martial training, Carla replied. Surviving the wall would be much harder without it. Only a fool of a noble would send their children out as free snacks for raiders. Does that mean you served as a commander on the wall? Liam asked. Unfortunately not, Carla sighed. I ended up as a logistics officer at the Kalincha Gate before coming to serve the Custodia household. You sound dissatisfied about that, Liam said. I wouldn't say I was dissatisfied. Noble women usually end up in backline positions like that, even though we can be just as good as the men in combat. I had reasonable expectations going in. Fighting some demi-humans was more something I wanted to try out at least once. Did you fight in the war? I did. Carla brightened. After helping out with evacuations across the bay to the south, I served as an officer in the Holy Kingdom's Southern Army. Again, I was relegated to logistics, but I got to see plenty of action. The demi-humans are raiders through and they targeted supply trains and depots the entire time we were holding them off. Why does it seem like the South has a lot of strong warriors? It's mostly just the nobles, knights, and professional armsmen. You know, the people who are expected to fight and train thoroughly to defend a house's territory. The North had plenty, as well, but getting swarmed by fiends is quite a bit more unreasonable than fighting the average demi-human. Remedios rose from her bed as Carla and Liam continued chatting. Sunrise was near, and there would undoubtedly be an emergency session of the royal court. Since the matter revolved around a potential war, she would almost certainly be summoned to attend. Liam excused himself when Remedios came out of her wardrobe with a towel. She brooded over the night's developments, wondering if the Holy Kingdom's woes would ever end. I believe the conservatives will be showing up, as well, Carla said as she helped Remedios out of her bath and into her armor. With an army? Most of their forces will probably be stationed in Rimune, but they should appear with whatever they can ship into Cantor. Our domestic politics are about to change drastically. How so? Well, it's not a secret that they intended to rally behind Prince Felipe. If their candidate is dead. I wouldn't make that assumption yet, Remedios said. It's an entire trading fleet we're talking about, here. They may be putting in for repairs in Riastais or Argland. That's true, Carla admitted. It is difficult to imagine the entire fleet being destroyed. I suppose life nowadays tends to make one think negatively about everything. The maid's eyes widened as Remedios reached out to grip her by the shoulders, looking her in the eye. Well, just hold in there, all right? She said. If we can't keep things going, then who will? Carla smiled slightly, looking down at the hem of her skirt. Yes, of course. You're absolutely right, Miss Custodio. The leaders of our country must smile and look forward for the sake of the people, even if all they want to do is break down and cry. Don't you forget it, Remedios nodded, though attending an emergency session with said leaders already makes me want to break down and cry. I'm sure it will be a uniquely lovely experience. Carla looked up with a grin. Shall I bring breakfast up to the Solar? There's still much to discuss about the coming session. After a breakfast conversation that made her head numb, Remedios left for the Holy Order's headquarters. The streets on the way to the palace grounds were packed with retainers of every sort. Armsmen made a show of confidence at their posts while household staff scurried in every direction delivering messages or carrying supplies. Parked carriages overflowed from manor lots onto the roadways, causing her to wonder just how many nobles had come in from the countryside. She found a row of long faces at the front desk of the Holy Order office. Anyone find out anything useful? Remedios asked. That depends on what you already know, Gustav answered. The other paladins seemed surprised that Gustav expected her to know anything. Of course, they weren't aware of Liam's place in it all. Everyone's saying that the trade fleet's washing up on our shores in pieces, Remedios said. There are even rumors of war with our neighbors off the coast. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Gustav's long face grew longer as he rubbed his beard. The royal court is convening in half an hour. We've all been summoned to attend. So they didn't know anything more than that? I'm not sure that His Divine Grace even knows that much, Gustav sighed. It was the cabinet that requested that an emergency session be called. We should get going by all of the carriages parked in the prime estates. It's going to be packed. Gustav quickly went through the usual briefing for court sessions before leading them out of the office. The High Hall of Hobans was already 3/4 filled by the time they arrived to assume their positions at the base of the throne's dais. Unlike normal court sessions, the nobles couldn't divide themselves by faction, so they settled for grouping into little cliques instead. Not long after, the members of the king's cabinet filed into the room and took their places at the long tables to either side of the dais. Caspon didn't appear with them, however, and the air of the hall grew stifling as the official starting time of the session came and went. Royal guardsmen went to open the balcony windows to cool things down when the number of impatient expressions grew in the crowd. 30 minutes later, the Holy King finally appeared, shuffling to the throne with a sleepy-eyed yawn as the herald announced his entry. A ripple of disdain swept across the assembled nobles at Caspon's slovenly entrance. Remedios tapped a finger on the pommel of her sword, wondering what sort of opening awaited them. "Good morning, my lords," the Holy King yawned again. "The Prime Minister has informed me that a matter of great import demands our attention." Caspon was distinctly underwhelming before. Remedios couldn't find the words to describe him now. Nothing about him was kingly and the nobles in front of her had all put on their expressionless masks. The Prime Minister stood and looked up at the king with a perfectly straight face. "Your Divine Grace," he said, "settlements all along the northern coast have reported an unheard-of volume of wreckage washing ashore. Based on our findings, we have no choice but to assume that Prince Felipe's fleet has met with some great tragedy." "How do we know this?" the Holy King asked. "Of the wreckage analyzed," the Prime Minister replied, "we've identified debris from 24 ships from the trade fleet. Our people have barely begun to sort through it all, so we can expect far greater losses than that." "That's terrible," Caspon traced his upper lip with his index finger. "When did this happen?" "We are not precisely sure when the ships were destroyed, but the wreckage started showing up about a day ago." "Based on a day ago?" Caspon leaned forward on his throne. "Why didn't you immediately bring this to our attention?" "Immediately? Why, Your Divine Grace, that is the minimum time it takes for a ship to deliver this information directly from the northern coast to Hobans." The rustle of fabric whispered through the hall as the assembled nobles shifted uncomfortably at the interaction. Caspon stared blankly at the Prime Minister for several moments before leaning back in his seat. "Continue," he said. "Yes, Your Divine Grace. Based on our limited information, we can only conclude that the debris field was carried by the currents of the Jaya from a spot over the horizon between our shores and Argland. They would have washed ashore in Argland if the ships had been destroyed earlier." "Does that mean Riestais attacked Prince Felipe's fleet?" Caspon asked. Light laughter filled the air of the hall. The Prime Minister lowered his head to conceal his twitching lips. "The possibility is negligible, Your Divine Grace. Riestais does have a navy, but it is stationed on its northern coast to guard against the Baharuth Empire. But they could sail their navy over to attack the fleet, yes." The nobles visibly fought to keep their faces straight. It seemed like Caspon had displayed his ignorance again. "Riestais doesn't have a national navy as we do, Your Divine Grace," the Prime Minister said. "The naval forces guarding Riestais against the Baharuth Empire are the property of House Eurovana and operate out of the naval station of Re-Euruval. Rest assured, House Eurovana has absolutely no reason to sail all the way around Argland's territorial waters to attack our trade fleet. Never mind that, they would be utterly obliterated by our forces." "We see," Caspon smiled. "Well, that's very reassuring." Yes, Your Divine Grace, I suppose that it is." A long silence hung in the air after the Prime Minister's words trailed off. He wasn't the only one wearing a thoroughly confounded expression. After silently working his mouth for several seconds, he finally managed to push the discussion forward. "Pending additional evidence, 2 possibilities present themselves as the culprit for this unprecedented destruction. The first is that a marauding power intercepted the fleet and destroyed it north of our shores. We find that highly unlikely, as Argland wouldn't suffer such an attack so near to their borders. None would dare to tempt the wrath of their draconic counselors. The second possibility is that they were attacked by the demi-human tribes in the waters off of the coast. The information we've gathered supports the latter possibility," Lord Cohen said. "We've recently received multiple demands from different tribes to cease fishing along our northern coast. In response, we ordered the people to comply with the demand, but there may have been those who continued violating the treaties. Or the fault may lie with the conservatives to the west," another noble muttered. "We've done no such thing," Lord Agrella, the conservative representative in the court replied. "In fact, we never received the same demands in the first place. This is solely the fault of the gross mismanagement of progressive territories." The poor people suffering under your heel probably ignored your ban on fishing because they'd starve otherwise. The court exploded into a vicious shouting match with each side blaming the other. Gustav slammed the tip of his scabbard on the dais several times. "Order!" he shouted, "order!" It took several minutes for the row to end. As usual, the Holy King didn't seem to think anything of the disturbance. "There is no definitive proof as to the cause of this incident," the Prime Minister said. "It may not be Roble's fault at all. Our current concern is mustering a response to the threat lurking off of our shores. Those responsible for managing the northern territories are mustering troops in the cities along the Central Highway, but what more can we do?" "If what you say is true," Caspon said, "will gathering land forces matter in any way? Should we not send the Marines instead?" Enrique Bells, the new commander of the Marines in the blue of the 9 colors, stepped out from where he was standing close to the balcony. "We've been preparing to send an expedition to investigate our missing shipping along the coast," he said. "In light of our current findings, however, it would be unwise to send our forces into the unknown. Additionally, I spoke to Ransu and Rin and he had some additional bad news to share." Enrique's expression shifted in shades of uncertainty as his azure gaze went to the Holy King. "What is it?" Caspon asked. "The demi-human tribes off of our shores have grown increasingly uneasy. None of the local sea dragons have been sighted since midsummer. We've gone from bad to worse." Worried murmurs rose from the assembly. It was an ill omen of the highest degree. Most of the Holy Kingdom's coastal population, in other words, 2/3 of the country's population, considered the sea dragons guardian deities. The rest of the population at least considered them benevolent allies. The already precipitous atmosphere that had fallen over the Holy Kingdom would deteriorate even further if the people learned of their disappearance. "Ransu and Rin is leading an investigation to discern the truth of the matter," Enrique continued, "but I strongly recommend against doing anything that might agitate our neighbors even further." "Then what are we to do?" Lord Cohen let out a helpless laugh. "Sit on our hands and wait for whatever doom lies beyond the horizon to fall upon our heads? I do not like this feeling that we were slowly being strangled in our sleep." "Why not look beyond our borders for assistance?" Lord Agrella suggested. "A threat lurking off of our northern coast is also a threat lurking off of the coasts of Riastais and Argland. They may have more information on the matter. The gods know they're in a better position to do something about this than us, especially Argland. Riastais is as powerless as we are," Lord Cohen snorted. "The only difference between us and them is that they won't starve if they lose their ocean access. For the same reason, that makes them unlikely to come to our aid, they didn't even send a single regiment to assist us when Yaldabaoth invaded." "Argland has always maintained their policy of non-interference," the Prime Minister said. "Unless this threat is on a scale that the Dragon Lords are obliged to intervene, Argland will not make any movements." "But dragons have died," Caspon noted. "Shouldn't that justify intervention?" The Prime Minister didn't even bother hiding his weariness over the Holy King's ignorance this time. "Their policy of non-interference applies to even dragons, Your Divine Grace. The Platinum Dragon Lord can turn our country into a pile of sand in a blink of an eye. He is an existence that can slay even gods, and he will only move if powers unfathomable to our minds threaten the sanctity of the world itself." "Indeed," Lord Cohen nodded. "I can only pray that the issue isn't something that forces Argland's hand. Any number of countries may disappear overnight if it is." "In that case," Caspon said, "what about those who have already demonstrated their willingness to help us? The Sorceress Kingdom, for instance." Vicar Salazar cleared his throat. "It is the stance of the temples that we refrain from any further collaboration with the undead. I understand that recent events have cast the Sorcerer King in a favorable light with the people, but we must understand that the evil of the undead is both unfathomable and immortal in scope. What may seem like kindnesses to the common man are only seeds of destruction being planted for future harvest. No good can come out of any beneficial relationship with the Sorceress Kingdom." Remedios nodded in agreement. Whatever his vices might be, the vicar was correct about the undead menace that was the Sorcerer King. Is that so?" Caspon's cheek twitched. "Then it appears that we are quite limited in our options." "That is, unfortunately, the case, Your Divine Grace," the Prime Minister said. "Very well," the Holy King smiled thinly. "We shall continue gathering our strength along the central defense line, and we trust that everyone will cooperate to maintain order and security while we await further developments." Patience may very well be our greatest ally in this situation. That fool. That absolute fool. A man's enraged voice drifted out from the window beneath Liam's feet. In the evening following the emergency session of Hoban's royal court, similar sentiments were expressed across the prime estates. Seemingly no one had a good opinion of the Holy King before, but now their attitudes bordered on outright hostility. Does he think we can station our armies outside the cities indefinitely? Who does he think is paying for everything? At least we'll be able to spread our troops out along the highway come winter. Winter, the first noble snorted. We'll be overwhelmed by disease before then. Temple staff will have to be brought along from the south just to manage. Transport will be troublesome. We'll be able to move 500 men every 4 days, at most. The number of houses waiting to lease our ship has grown tenfold, as well. 3 are calling in favors for grain delivery. Curse it all. Has this country been bedeviled? At this rate, I wouldn't be surprised if the sun just decided to not rise tomorrow. The discussion devolved into a formless rant, so Liam moved on. He thought that the Holy Kingdom was in a bad situation from the start, but there seemed to be no limit to how much worse things could become. He dropped in behind a hedgerow, going unnoticed by the street patrols on the other side as he navigated the prime estates. The additional chaos and increasingly crowded surroundings made it even easier to get around than usual. In the shadows of a small public garden, he paused to listen in on a small group of noble women. Will you be returning to Debonai, as well? Yes, not long after my lord husband arrives from Rimmune. It seems that I'll be shipped south with the grain. The group's slight laughter filtered through the leaves. I suppose it can't be helped. I certainly wouldn't want to be here with tens of thousands of men flooding into the city. What about your daughter? Carla? I'll let her know closer to the departure date. Some marriage prospects are arriving from Rimmune with the ship, as well. My, such troubling times, and you're thinking of making a match. It is precisely in troubling times that the young are more amenable to potential matches, are they not? Never mind accepting suitable matches, they'll be busy trying to make heirs due to the situation. I suppose you're right about that. Who did you have in mind? Several young men have proven themselves quite capable of managing their holdings in the north. Let's see. Liam slunk away. He wasn't sure if they were talking about Carla Vigo, but she probably wouldn't want to leave the Custodia household, and he didn't want her interrogating him at swordpoint for names so she could preemptively assassinate anyone who might threaten to take her away. After visiting a dozen other manors, Liam returned to Rimmune Gate. Sir Jimena was in the captain's office debriefing a pair of House Rastello's new thief-takers. Liam, he said. How did it go? There's a lot of information to sort through, sir. Did something happen while I was away? Just the opposite, the knight said. Everyone's so damn busy dealing with the news that they've pretty much forgotten we exist. I've been sending our thief-takers out into the rest of the city to collect information. I hope you haven't assigned them to do anything too risky, Liam said. They're getting better, but they're not that good yet. Nothing illegal at all, the knight replied. It's mostly just walking around taking note of gossip, deployments, supplies, and the like. Then they better have good memories. Aside from needing to study magic, the most unexpected thing about his work was the sheer amount of stuff he needed to memorize. Ijania even had entire sections of training dedicated to retaining information gathered on the field. They even got him used to picking up bits of intelligence from his surroundings while actively engaging in combat. They had better, for their sake, Sir Jimena muttered. Head back to the camp. Sir Jorge will receive your report there. Yes, sir. House Rastello's labor camp had grown fivefold since he had started working for them, but now it was twice as busy as when he left it earlier in the evening. He eyed the activity curiously. It looked like they were cleaning up the place, at least as clean as one could get for a city of tents. The camp's administrative center had undergone a small transformation, looking less like a makeshift office and more like a square decorated for the harvest festival. Liam frowned when he saw who was standing in front of the overseer's tent. Marim, he said. What are you guys doing here? All of B Company's here, the patrol sergeant replied, since everyone in the city's too busy with their own worries to bother us. Sir Jorge had us come in to look all impressive. I don't know who it is, but it looks like we've got an important guest coming. If they were meeting in the camp instead of Lord Rastello's manor in the Prime Estates, did it mean that House Rastello was plotting a major move? Then again, The Prime Estates had grown insanely crowded. Inside the tent, Liam found Sir Jorge being dressed up by his wife. The knight sent a thankful look in his direction before shooing the woman away. "She will be the end of me, I tell you," Sir Jorge said. "Did you know she bought 5 different sets of formal wear for me without my knowing? I asked her why, and she told me it was necessary. Pa, what need does a man have for 5 suits? Tell me, does Nat do this to you?" "Not really," Liam replied. "I guess she did upgrade my bandolier 3 times in the last 2 weeks. Ah, how I envy you. Maybe you had the right idea after all, Keep her busy at home so she does not become busy in the market." Nat visited markets and shops in the city all the time, so Liam didn't follow Sir Jorge's reasoning. She just tried to upgrade her husband in a different way. "So, Sir Jorge took a seat at his desk. Was your excursion fruitful?" "I'll let you be the judge of that," Liam said. "I won't pretend to understand even half of what they were talking about." He waited while the knight produced an inkwell and a stack of fresh paper. Sir Jorge lightly dipped his quill and looked up at Liam expectantly. First of all," Liam said, "it doesn't seem like anyone likes the Holy King much anymore." "I don't think anyone was particularly fond of him in the first place," Sir Jorge shrugged. "Well, he did have plenty of supporters after the war, but that support assumed that he would be the man he was before the war." "What was he like before the war?" Liam asked. "Many believed that he was the best candidate for the throne," Sir Jorge answered. "His brother Felipe was too much of an eccentric and he tried to introduce many strange, foreign ideas. Additionally, everyone worried that, if he ascended the throne, his successor wouldn't even be a human." "What about Kalka?" "Kalka was, well, Kalka. Beautiful, powerful, and idealistic. A bad combination for a leader, if you ask me. Those types always end up as villains in the tales." "It still sounds like she was pretty popular." "She still was, apparently. It was understandable given the hell that they were plunged into after her death." "Well, beautiful things are best viewed from afar, eh?" As the Holy Queen, she and her followers pushed many reforms that no one wanted while leaving many, more important matters by the wayside. Caspond, at least, would have run things more to everyone's liking, or at least that's what we thought. Liam wasn't certain about Sir Jorge's assessment of Kalka. From what he had gathered, the Holy Queen was a highly popular ruler who prioritized the well-being of her subjects. She wasn't a fearful or power-hungry autocrat and had talented people working under her to achieve her vision. In many ways, she reminded Liam of the Sorcerer King, who ruled in a similar manner with similar desires for his country and subjects. "I guess no one thinks that way about the Holy King anymore," Liam said. "I think the words most frequently used to describe him today are imbecile, fool, oblivious, and troglodyte. The nobles in the Prime Estates weren't even afraid of being heard from the street." "That has been a long time in coming, I think," Sir Jorge said. "We royalists, well, House Rastello was a royalist house back then, felt that he could be used to bring some much-needed reform to the Holy Kingdom. Alas, it seems that a weak king is no good for a kingdom no matter how favorable his weakness is to you. But, you can understand how one couldn't help but try, yes? Does that mean the royalists are going to change their strategy?" "I'm sure that they have already been in the process of doing so," Sir Jorge said. "Everyone must assume that the crown is not to be relied on for leadership and direction. The aristocratic establishment will assume a more independent and assertive stance for the good of the Holy Kingdom and its people. I suppose you could say that the royalist actions to suppress the power of the crown work to facilitate this, and you can expect the establishment as a whole to do the same for as long as Caspon sits on the throne. The royalists don't sound much like royalists anymore." "You are correct in that. No one will seriously support the crown anymore. Even the temples may shun Caspond. It is fortunate we are not a tyrannical, autocratic regime like the Baharuth Empire, else there would be no hope for the Holy Kingdom." Most people had a generally good opinion of the Empire, but, if the Empire ended up with an incompetent ruler like Caspond, that would have indeed been a terrible thing. Any opposition would simply be crushed under the heel of the Imperial Army. Liam could only be thankful that he came from a country with an immortal sovereign who possessed power, wisdom, and intelligence beyond human comprehension. "Now," Sir Jorge said, "what else have you heard?" "Royalist logistics are breaking down," Liam replied. "Those ships that have gone missing are really hurting them now. Everyone's desperate to lease transports for troops and cargo. Yes, Sir Jorge signed. That will severely limit our ability to support any armies in the north. Every soldier that we field is a soldier that we must supply. Between our work camps and the northern harvest, we'll be able to sustain our forces if they stay near the towns and cities, but no one will be able to march very far relying on land logistics. You specified royalist logistics. Does this mean that the conservatives do not share the same issues? Liam nodded. None of the conservative nobles I've listened in on have mentioned any logistical issues. In fact, the royalists are trying to lease ships from the conservatives because they haven't lost any. Sir Jorge leaned on his armrest, stroking his thin moustache with a furrow on his brow. His confusion was understandable, as even House Rastello had encountered misfortune in the north. The sea sprite had departed Cantor weeks previous with Sir Luis and not a trace of it could be found. How can that be? Sir Jorge half said to himself, does that mean they are aware of what is going on in the north? No, if they intended to throw their weight behind Felipe, then. Sir Jorge. Mariam's voice sounded from the entrance of the tent. The knight looked up from his thoughts. Yes, what is it? Our guests have arrived at the front of the camp. I was beginning to think they wouldn't show up at all. How are our preparations? I think they're as good as we can get them, sir. I'll be right out. Sir Jorge rose from his desk. He made it halfway to the entrance before his wife swooped in and pounced on him like a hawk on a bunya. I.e. What are you doing, woman? The Lord is here and you're still half-dressed. Half-dressed? This is already ow 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 ow. Liam went for the entrance as the woman savagely raked a comb through Sir Jorge's hair. He could do nothing to save the beleaguered knight. Liam. Sir Jorge called out behind him, ensure the perimeter is secure. He saluted after the knight issued his final command, then left and fastened the entrance shut. The sentries outside sent glances at the tent every time a wail leaked out. Poor guy, Mariam said. That woman is really something. I'm glad we got uniforms or he might have unleashed her on us. I still have no idea what's going on, Liam said. Why is everything all fancied up? Who is this guest? Ah, I guess you've been out in the city all evening. Lord Rastello is entertaining a noble guest here. Entertaining a noble guest after midnight? Well, the patrol sergeant said, we were expecting them all evening, but I guess it took that long to come in from Cantor. 5 minutes. A voice called out. Liam broke off from the sentries to examine the surroundings. The immediate area around the tent was all he could manage before Lord Rastello and his party arrived. Liam concealed himself out of habit, watching the procession from between stacks of neatly arranged supplies. Who is that? The noble walking beside Lord Rastello was unfamiliar, and the 8 knights accompanying them bore unfamiliar livery. Each of the knights had a dangerous feeling about them and Liam receded into the shadows as they scrutinized their surroundings with clear, sharp gazes. Sir Jorge popped out of the overseer's tent just before the party arrived. A smiling maid came out behind him. I took a moment for Liam to realize that the maid was Sir Jorge's wife. Welcome, Sir Jorge bowed politely, Lord Rastello, Lord Vigo. Welcome to our humble little operation. I am Sir Jorge, the camp overseer. This is my wife, Lady Esmeralda. Thank you for the warm welcome, Sir Jorge. Lord Vigo nodded. It's been a long trip from Cantor. I can imagine, my lord. When did you arrive from Rimune? Early in the afternoon. It's a good thing that the roads were in excellent condition. They were even paved to the hills. Yes, there was a need to improve the softer sections with all of the traffic to Hobans these days. Housecohen saw to it not long after being appointed to Cantor. Do your men need any additional assistance situating themselves? They should be fine, Lord Vigo replied. Thank you for going out of your way to prepare the fields for us. Ah, it's our pleasure, my lord, Sir Jorge said. With everyone coming to the capital with their men, we're trying to stay ahead of the demand for camp space. After a long set of introductions and pleasantries were exchanged, Sir Jorge led his guests into the tent. Lord Vigo's knights formed a ring around its perimeter. Liam tested their detection as he listened in from afar. What's the latest you've heard from the capital, Lord Vigo? Lord Rastello asked. Nothing out of the ordinary, recently. I take it that the royal court called an emergency session? Lord Rastello snorted. If you can call it that. We had to suffer through Caspon's increasingly insufferable antics. His ignorance was made plain for all to see, and I'm not even sure that he cares at all about what is going on. I've read the accounts delivered from our allies about his conduct over the past few months, Lord Vigo said, but I still find it difficult to believe he's that far gone. He was raised as a prince, as far as anyone knows. There's not the slightest hint of that. It even feels as if his words belong to the thoughts of others. The thoughts of others? Indeed. It's been a source of friction multiple times since he took the throne. One house or the other is occasionally accused of influencing Caspont behind everyone else's backs. Our reports did say that he was too easily swayed, Lord Vigo said. Has there been any indication of where this influence might lead? No. It's random, as far as I can tell. Random? Are you implying that there's no reason or rhyme as to whom he is listening to and why? As strange as it sounds, yes. The royal court was wary of it at first, as many suspected it was some ploy to keep us off balance. Now that he has thoroughly proven his incompetence, however, it's become a wearisome routine that grows more annoying by the day. A set of young women came by to offer the knights refreshments and a late meal. The knights were polite and accepted the hospitality, and they also politely brushed aside the women's attempts at flirting with them. Liam pondered the harmonious show they were putting on. Why was a conservative noble in House Rostello's camp in the first place? Hoban's population was rapidly swelling due to the influx of aristocrats and their men, so everyone was probably looking for a place to stay. The city itself was already out of the question by midday, so anyone else would have to camp outside of the walls. Unless the Conservatives wanted to go begging the Royalists for space, House Rostello was the only option. Still, there wasn't any reason for a high-security meeting in the middle of the night. Something else had to be going on. What are the Duke's plans in light of recent developments? Lord Rostello asked. Nothing beyond what is expected, I would say, Lord Vigo replied. While what we've been discovering is grave indeed, the fundamental divide between us and the Royalists remains. So long as they insist on their rampant exploitation of the North, we will remain firmly in opposition. That may be a difficult thing to ask. On paper, the benefits of the new methods are clear. This is especially true when one considers that the aristocracy seems to have no choice but to limit the power of the crown. The danger that Caspont represents is such that we must never allow him the means to force through any policies without gaining the establishment's approval first. As much as I dislike the idea, Lord Vigo admitted, it may be necessary to do so. But only the latter part. It is clear that the methods employed in the West are more beneficial for the Holy Kingdom as a whole. The abuses in the East gain little and cost much. Was House Rostello trying to broker a deal between the Royalists and Conservatives? There didn't seem to be much point in that. Caspont's position was so weak that he didn't stand a chance against the nobles should they oppose him. If anything, Lord Rostello said, your faction will be doing more to empower Caspont than the Royalists. From what I understand, you still pay your dues to the crown in full while also rendering your services for free. That's not incorrect, Lord Vigo said, but our point still stands. The goal of suppressing the crown's power can still be achieved without resorting to royalist methods. Urban centers only accounted for a third of royal revenues before the war. That's nowhere near enough to overturn the establishment's advantage. But it is enough to give a fool ideas, and Caspont is a fool amongst fools. Our superiority must be unquestionable, even to one such as he. Liam stifled a yawn. Did debates between nobles always go like this? It was no wonder that they couldn't get anything done quickly without being forced into a situation that required immediate action. The meeting stretched on for another hour before the nobles decided to continue the discussion in the morning. Not much had been accomplished beyond reviewing information and outlining stances that were already well known. The Holy King's passiveness over everything seemed to encourage everyone to take their time despite everyone agreeing that something needed to be done. With little else to do, he returned to the city to resume his patrol. Morning revealed a drastic change in the countryside from atop the city's curtain walls. The surrounding labor camps, which created a belt of tents along the edge of the city's 1-kilometer perimeter, had doubled in size overnight with the addition of the aristocracy's forces, and more still were on their way. It appeared that the fields had been hurriedly harvested in advance of their arrival. Back on the ground, Liam found Nat waiting for him as usual at the gate. The girl smiled and waved before coming up to join him as he left the city. Liam glanced at her as she took his left arm. She had changed quite a bit from the timid girl who was waiting for a man to pick her up on the platform.
"Good morning, dear," Nat said. "Good morning, Nat. How was your night?"
"Crazy. It's become even crazier now that the sun's come up. June looked like she was going to explode this morning."
"Explode?" The merchant who ran Nat's stall was pretty excitable.
He wasn't sure if humans could explode, though.
"There's just so much to do now."
She was trying to go in every direction at once, looking for new business opportunities. Then, she woke up this morning to find that a whole army camp popped up beside us. She says that they told her even more men are coming. "Did anyone buy your stuff?"
"It all went poof 5 minutes after June opened the stand," Nat replied.
"Everyone's looking for everything. We're trying to figure out whether we should keep filling army contracts or switch to supplying all of the new people arriving. They must be paying pretty well if you're thinking of switching from those armor contracts." Since she could produce multiple suits of armor simultaneously without worrying about finding buyers, Nat was averaging 3 suits per day. Not only was it an astonishing rate of production, but it was also making her rich. "Well," Nat said, "the best part is that the soldiers that are coming in are buying armor too. And they're paying in real coin, just like the Royal Army. Our plan for now is to just keep making armor, but sell as much as we can to all these new people." According to Sir Jorge, the armor contracts are barely moving. "That means we should take advantage of the temporary demand from these army camps setting up around the city."
Liam nodded at her explanation. It made sense, as far as he could tell.
One thing he hadn't realized while operating in the Holy Kingdom until recently was the nature of Lanka leather and how prevalent it was. Unlike the cattle in Riestais, Lanka were magical beasts. Some people said they were a type of Nook or maybe closely related to them. Because they were magical beasts, it meant that goods derived from Lanka were superior to those made from regular cattle. The dishes they were turned to were better, their hides and bones were better, even the glue made from them was better. When it came to armor, it gave the Holy Kingdom's light infantry the option to function as heavy infantry, or maybe their heavy infantry operated as light infantry. Needless to say, rogues and rangers used it as well, and it gave them a surprising level of protection. This also explained why Nat was growing so quickly. The material she was working with was far harder to handle than mundane leather. It also meant that the leather workers in the Holy Kingdom capable of producing Lanka leather goods were, in reality, far more skilled than they appeared to be. "What's going on there?" Nat asked. "I'm not sure, maybe it's just from all those people trying to move in." A huge crowd had gathered further west along the highway, past the entrance of House Rastello's labor camp. Upon closer inspection, they found many Rastello retainers gathered there as well, including several knights. They found Sir Jorge near the back of the crowd, surrounded by his subordinates. Liam couldn't see past all the people, so he went over to ask the overseer what was going on. "Sir Jorge."
"Ah,
Liam. "I figured you'd have beaten me here, I was working."
"Of course.
Forgive me for being so scatterbrained, too much is happening all at once." "What's this crowd for?" "The latest column of armsmen arrived from the west," Sir Jorge told him. "They bring most troubling news. The investigation of the flotsam washing up on the North Shore has turned up wreckage from the water god's fury." Liam frowned at the unfamiliar name. Sir Jorge offered a helpless smile at his reaction.
"Prince Felipe's flagship," the knight explained.
"It appears that the conservative faction no longer has its candidate,